Well, hello, Katrina, and welcome to the Rebuilding My Health Radio podcast. I am excited to have you here today and grateful that you are willing to share your story.
Absolutely, Casey. I am excited to be here.
Fantastic. So let's kind of just go back to the beginning of your story, your health story, and let us know what was kind of going on.
Yeah. So when all of this started, we had already done some work on our health. My daughter had had some tooth decay that we had used food to reverse, which was pretty profound for me. And so, I'm nursing my fifth baby and I had a mastitis and there's this huge lump. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a big mastitis. Kind of as it resolves, the lump is still there. And this is a golf ball size lump that's near the surface in my breast. So I can very clearly palpate it. And I was a little perplexed, but I wasn't super worried about it. My mom was the one that actually got freaked out. And it turns out that my grandmother had had a double mastectomy. And we're not 100% sure that it was cancer. Kind of weird that not knowing, but I guess back then they didn't talk about it as much. I'm not sure, but I can't imagine why else she would have a double mastectomy. So I proceeded, because we had had this food as medicine approach. I knew I wanted to go natural or at least try to do the best I could with that. So I immediately, my mom went with me, went down to a cancer clinic down in Mexico. I don't know. It was such a scary time, Casey, because I felt like I had been doing all the right stuff. Like we had been cleaning out our toiletries and cleaning products and, making all our own stuff. We were making our own condiments and, we moved to Idaho so that we could raise our own meat animals so they could be pristine. Like this was like, what in the world am I missing here? And I felt lost there. So what I did is, instead of just hunkering down in the things that I was doing more, I put everything on the table. Like, let's reevaluate everything that we're doing in terms of diet and lifestyle and everything, because clearly I am missing something if I have cancer. So that's where I went, like, okay, let's look, maybe raw vegan is the way, maybe juicing is the way, maybe, let's evaluate. And I had all these questions, and I'm down at the cancer clinic. It was a Gerson clinic. And I was asking all these questions. I'd read the books, and there were just some holes in the logic in there. And they had no answers. They would just say, like, oh, go read the books again. And I was getting very frustrated. So by the third day, the owner, the head of the clinic, came and sat me down. He's like, Katrina, my staff's been telling me that you've been asking a lot of questions, and I think, you just need to trust the process. Wow. I know, it was huge. And I'm like, mouth on the floor. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, but you haven't answered my questions. I mean, we're not talking like a little wart here. We're talking cancer. And this is kind of a big deal. And he's like, he looks me in the eye after I said this and was like, I think this isn't the place for you.
Wow.
So
because you had questions about a life-threatening illness.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, Casey, I have seen this happen over and over with clients, with whether it's an oncologist or an alternative health practitioner, is they just want blind trust, which I encourage all my clients, like, ask the questions. If somebody doesn't want to answer your questions and take the time, they're not the practitioner for you.
Yeah.
So they were not the practitioners for me.
Yeah, clearly.
I went home and was kind of in a downward spiral, like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And I found functional medicine, which was really interesting because I had never done any testing on myself. I would, read something, listen to my symptoms, and just take a supplement, and assumed that it always did what the blog said it would do, and that I was getting all the nutrition, and that was exactly what my body needed. So there's a lot of leaps there of logic of, like, I don't really know if that's what I need, if that's the problem I have, if the supplement's even getting in. So we started testing things I didn't even know you could test, and we found a lot of issues going on. And what we were doing was we were looking for what were the root cause drivers that would create cancer, allow my body to be so overwhelmed that my immune system, which is designed to address rogue cancer cells, was not able to tackle it because had so many other things going on. Mm. And we found a lot of things that I had no idea. I had no symptoms. They weren't even on my radar. So I was insulin resistant. I was estrogen dominant. I was hypothyroid. I had crazy low vitamin D levels. I had very heavy load of mold toxicity. I had some toxicity in my marriage. Like, there were a lot of things that were coming together to create this perfect storm for me that allowed my body to create this, let the cancer get out of control. I'll put it that way.
Right. Yeah. And you found a functional functional medicine practitioner to kind of like help do all the testing and uncover everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And this
super interesting.
This is when I found Dr. Nasha Winters, who is now a good friend and my mentor, who I've trained under. But back then I just had her book. And her book, Metabolic Approach to Cancer, I recommend to all my clients because it gives a really good framework of what to look for and how to approach this. And that's exactly what I did. This was my roadmap.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So then where did you go from there? Kind of how did you put together a care plan? Well, actually, let me ask one other question before, because this is super interesting to me. I guess, how did you make the decision to treat this naturally? Because that is not, cancer in particular is not something that people are usually treating naturally, and it goes against probably what friends and family were maybe pushing you to do or encouraging you to do, and kind of the world is encouraging you to do. So how did you make that decision?
That's a fantastic question. It was I look back at my life and I feel like God had kind of set it up so that I had the understanding and I had things happen in my life to where I had experienced food as medicine. So my oldest daughter, when she was 3, was having some tooth decay and was like, "Mommy, this hurts." I'm like, I guess we should take her into the dentist. It seemed a little weird at 3. And the dentist said, "Oh, she has 8 cavities and needs 3 baby root canals." I know, that's what I did. And I'm like, "Are you joking? Like, she's 3. And so he's looking at me and like, "Well, you have to stop feeding her soda and candy bars." I'm like, "Oh, she has never had that." And he's looking at me like I'm a liar. I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like, she's really never had that. We eat pretty healthy," or what I thought was healthy, but it was definitely not candy bars and sodas. So I had 3 other second opinions and they all kind of said about the same thing. So I'm like, okay, this is a thing. And a friend of mine pointed me to the Weston A. Price Foundation, and eventually to the GAPS diet. So when we started the GAPS diet, it stopped. And she had been having it had escalated in that time period where I was researching stuff and where she was having tooth abscesses. And I mean, it was pretty intense. So the tooth decay stopped and it started to get better. And I look back in hindsight and I had been very, very sick with her to the point where, and now knowing that I didn't even treat my cancer with standard of care, like I had to go on a medication that had to be suppository because I lost like 30 pounds in the first month with the hyperemesis gravidarum. So she did not get good prenatal nutrition, suffice it to say. I literally ate just fruit, which is not a healthy diet for a pregnant mama. So, I really think looking back in hindsight, not to blame myself, but to understand, I think that was a big factor. And it's really interesting. I could go off on this for hours. I have since, I have 7 kids total, and I've seen what knowing more and more about nutrition, like that last baby, oh my goodness. I had her when I was 44 and she is the healthiest thing ever. But I knew more then. I was a practitioner at that point and I was eating pate for most meals. Like she got huge nutrition. And I had things under control with my body. So that was a long answer. So seeing that change in her health it empowered me that like, oh, I can figure this out. I can find the people that can help me and bring in other things and resources. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you had that powerful experience of approaching something naturally. So, yeah, I mean, and it sounds like, really kind of like you're tuning into yourself probably as well, going, this is what feels right for
I
me.
I had seen other people that had done chemo and I didn't really care to go down that route. And
Mhm,
honestly, Casey, if I had not had my daughter's teeth experience, I don't think I would have had the courage or understanding
mhm.
to even think about trying alternative on my own. Like that would have been crazy.
Yeah.
But I was, I had the pieces in place for that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that gives you some confidence for sure. Yeah, to have had these experience, that's my experience as well. Like, yeah, I've had these successes approaching things naturally. So, you kind of that increases your confidence along the way. Okay, so tell us what your natural treatment looked like, kind of the pillars of it.
Yes. So diet is foundation. And then
Mm,
we tested everything to see like what were the issues for me. So, like I said, there's 10 root cause drivers that areas that can go off that have been shown in the research to be known carcinogens or things that promote cancer. So like I said, um, hypothyroid, known in the literature to have a higher risk of cancer when you have that going on. So it's not that it's that one thing, it's this
mm,
perfect storm of all these things going sideways at the same time that allow this. So then it
mm,
was a matter of addressing and supporting, depending on what it was. So with the mold protocols, that included like infrared saunas. It included remediating the house. There was a lot of aspects depending on what showed up to
mhm,
address. So this was a
mhm,
long process. My days
mhm.
were full. At that point, I had 5 children that were under 10. So they were, I'm still dealing with diapers and I'm trying to get the saunas in and the coffee enemas and like 5 million pills. And oh, I need to eat this way. So it was a lot. It was a full-time job.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, healing is very time consuming, really. And I can imagine, yeah, this multifaceted protocol was super time consuming. So yes, you said diet was foundational. And talk a little bit about Nasha Winters' metabolic approach to cancer and what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the base diet needs to be a ketogenic diet. This is what the literature is showing us. And it's so interesting to me because I look back at that cancer center that kicked me out, and I'm so grateful because that would have been a terrible fit for me. Um, so the idea is, we look back at Otto Warburg. He won the Nobel Prize in, I think it's 1931, for showing us that when cancer cells or when cells become cancer, the mitochondria shift how they're metabolizing fuel and they go into an anaerobic state, which is very inefficient. It produces a lot of acidity, which is why cancer cells are surrounded by an acid cloud, and it needs a lot of sugar. They can't use fat as a fuel source anymore. So the idea is that if you keep your blood sugar or get your blood sugar in check, as was the case with me, you can minimize how much fuel you're giving that cancer. And then
Mhm.
you can keep the other healthy cells in your body all revved up by giving them fat, which the cancer can't use as fuel. And then the next step, if you actually get into the place where you're putting, your body is making ketones, these can be extremely therapeutic for the body in terms of they can do things like signal the cancer cells and encourage them to create apoptosis, which is basically cell suicide. And that's what you want with cancer. You want to have that cleanup, cell death kind of thing going on, and the ketones stimulate that perfectly.
Fascinating, truly. I mean, you already knew that you had some insulin resistance. So yeah, insulin was an issue for you. Yeah. So,
Now, I didn't know that before I had cancer.
oh,
And
right.
here's the
Yeah.
thing that the takeaway for people listening is that when people have blood sugar issues, and I'm just going to be vague,
Hmm. Hmm.
wherever it is on that spectrum, they usually, unless it's like hypoglycemia where you get like shaky before meals, that's not the big bucket. That's like a small segment of people. Usually it's more the insulin resistant, somewhere on that spectrum, and you
Hmm.
don't feel bad. And I
Mm.
didn't feel bad. If you have high blood sugar, you don't feel bad. You feel good. And you've
Mm.
got all this blood sugar running around. You got fuel going crazy. Like it feels good. And so this is where, looking at the testing was really eye-opening to me because I never would have believed it otherwise.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That makes sense. And I keep hearing, this is just a little aside, women, moms, that I'm speaking with say like, oh, I'm pre-diabetic. Like, just, I think I eat healthy and I'm pre-diabetic. It feels like it's becoming either increasingly common or people are maybe getting a diagnosis when they wouldn't before. Like, so,
Yeah.
maybe a bit of both, it's
Well, and I
on
don't,
practitioners' radar. Yeah.
yes, it is being tested and talked about more. I don't think it's enough still. And people are taking that diagnosis of pre-diabetic very lightly. Even if they get it, they don't do
Mhm.
anything about it. And this is the worst part because, and you'll see me get a little amped up here. Like, this is the time when you have that pre-diabetic diagnosis, that's the time to do something because all the big chronic diseases are metabolic diseases. They're driven by having this blood sugar off. So whether you're talking about actual diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's is actually being called type 3 diabetes now. Like,
Mhm.
get it
Mhm.
while it's not an issue so that you don't get to that place. This is 100% fixable with
Mhm.
diet alone. And,
Mhm.
sometimes, like in my case, there were some genetic hiccups that made it a little harder. There was the mold toxicity, which mold will make it harder to get that in play. It messes up all the hormones. But, that's where
Mhm.
you want to do the digging in of like, why is this not good? Like, what's going on with my body? And do it before it gets like way out of control.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so diet was foundational for you. You were also addressing mold toxicity with your protocols and kind of detox in general. It sounds like with sauna, coffee enemas. Um, what else did you mention? Kind of the pillars.
Yeah. So my hormones were really off, my sex
Hmm.
hormones. And I had high levels of estrogen, really low levels of progesterone, which is known
Hmm.
to be a driver of, whether it's hormone driven cancer or not. My thyroid was in the toilet. It was like really sluggish, which I did
Hmm.
feel a little tired, but I had just had a baby, so that's understandable, right?
Right. Yeah.
Let's see, the vitamin D was really interesting, Casey, because I had been taking cod liver oil for years. And I thought, oh, I'm good. I got that. And I took the test and it was so, so low.
Hmm.
And I started doing, I'm like, I'm going to do this all food as medicine. And so I just doubled down and tripled my dose of the cod liver oil. And I tested 3 months later, it did nothing, literally nothing. This
Hmm.
is why I tell people, like, don't miss the testing, the retesting, because you don't know if the supplement did anything. So we went through, this took me over a year. I went through 5 different forms of like the best, most bioavailable vitamin D, and it never moved a single point. And then I found this one and I'm like, okay, we'll just try it. It's in coconut oil. That seems good. It's fat soluble vitamin, etc. And when we retested that one, I got an attachment from the lab that I was approaching the levels of toxicity because I was at 125. I'm like, we did a little happy dance. I'm like, I'm toxic. like, um,
Wow.
so clearly I don't want it at 125. I let it come back
Hmm.
down. But then I had the play of testing and retesting to find where my personal dose was. And it's
Hmm.
higher than you would think. It's,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's needed to stay that way because I have a genetic hiccup. I don't convert vitamin D well, which is good to know. And this will be something on my radar for the rest of my life. And that's fine because it just involves taking a pill. No big deal.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and vitamin D is important because it's been shown to be important for your immune system, et cetera. So
Yes, it plays
that's
into a lot of the different terrains, but the immune system area would be the major thing. But it can contribute to a lot of other areas functioning well.
Mhm.
Then the other thing that I mentioned there was the marriage was not working. And I want to highlight this because having emotional trauma and stress is a huge driver of cancer. And usually what I see and what Dr. Nasha sees is that within the year prior to a diagnosis, there's something that has like deeply hurt the patient's heart. So whether it's like somebody they love was in a car accident, they lost their job, their dad died, like whatever it is, there's something really serious going on that needs to be addressed. And this is the area that people don't connect and people brush under the carpet and they kind of do this like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with it. And I did that for a long time too. It's really easy because there's not like a pill to take. There's not a protocol to do. There's not a test to see it get better on, and this is where we really need to own the fact that there is a spiritual, emotional, mental component to our physicality in terms of our health.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I see that in almost in every interview that I do, there's been some stressor like right before. Yeah, like often it's going to college. Like it's often like positive things, but so many of the people I've interviewed have said, "Oh, my first year of college with all this stress, or first year of grad school with all the stress, or after having a baby, or after divorce, or a death in the family."
Exactly.
It's almost like I'm listening for that and it's like, oh, there it is. I mean, there was some major stressor that preceded the illness. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So working on your marriage was critical. Sounded like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that like you said makes it a full-time job, plus you had your kids, your young kids. So um it was a challenge, I'm sure. So what changes did you start to see in your health, and kind of how did you get to cancer free, and how long did that take?
It took, let's see, for the tumor to be gone, it took a little over a year, a few months over a year, from when I found it in March to when it was gone in, I think it was June. So,
Okay.
yeah, it was a big thing. And I noticed, my energy levels went up, hair started growing back better. I lost some weight, over the long haul. It wasn't like all at once. It was not as like rainbows parting through the sky because I didn't really have symptoms that much beforehand. So, probably the biggest was the brain fog, like, I mean, part of that's, is postpartum, but a lot of it, when you get on a ketogenic diet, the ketones are like magic in your brain. Your brain loves to live on ketones. So it really lit things up. And that's where, okay, I've got the energy and brain power. Like, I really want to understand what just happened to me at a deeper level. And so, before I was even fully, I mean, the lump was gone. And then that fall, I started training because I was like, I want to understand things. So I went back to school.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So this kind of led to a career change, where you studied with Dr. Nasha Winters, and to become a what do you call it? MATC practitioner,
Yeah.
metabolic approach to cancer.
Yeah, it was a long journey. I did not intend to work with clients at the beginning. I was just doing it selfishly for me and for my family. And I went through nutrition school, and then I did 2 years of functional lab training before I started working with Dr. Winters. And, going through all that, I kept getting cancer clients because I had been pretty vocal and open about what I was doing. And so people, when they have somebody in their life, they would just, it was all 100% referrals too.
Mhm.
And I kind of didn't want to work with cancer at first because it's really intense and it's really heavy. And I didn't feel like I knew enough, but
Mhm.
over time I realized you'll never know enough.
Yeah.
And I'm always learning. I'm doing continuing ed stuff and reading books every single day still, because there's so much that comes out all the time. And, so I finally, after Dr. Nasha's program, I'm like, yes, I'm ready. Here we are. Officially now, even though I've been seeing cancer clients for a while.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this approach definitely sounds like something that works well in an integrative way. If someone is choosing to do the typical standard of care for cancer, they can um, concurrently apply a metabolic approach. And it sounds like that is typically or often the route that you see your clients taking.
Yes, yes. I have kind of the whole spectrum, which is kind of
Mhm.
interesting. So I have people that, don't even have a diagnosis because they are like, I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. And then I have people that are at the beginning of their journey, people that are wanting to work integratively. They've read some things and such. I get quite a few people that are at stage 4 where, standard of care is thrown to the side. And is this going to completely turn it around? Maybe. If not, it's definitely going to make them feel better and have a better quality of life. And then I'd say a large portion of my clients are people that have done standard of care and they know that they did not address the root cause issue. And so they're circling back around because they don't want to live in fear of, that black cloud. When's the other shoe going to drop kind of thing? And so then they come back to do the functional work then.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was listening to an interview the other day on Chris Beat Cancer. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that podcast, but yeah, and the guest on there said, most people never address what the root cause was of the cancer. You kind of just do the treatment and you move on. So I think it's really important that you mention that, that that is a big part of all of this is really not just to get you through it, but you want to prevent it from coming back. So you really have to look at those root causes like you did.
That's a really key thing that I wish more people were talking about, because with standard of care, it's very tumor centric. It's make the
Mhm.
tumor be gone. And that's
Mhm.
all they're looking at. So for example, most of us know that breast cancer is a lot of times it's hormone driven. It's very connected with the sex hormones, and standard of care will do tests to see like, oh, that tumor is like estrogen positive and things like that. But they don't test the hormones in that woman ever. They will give her drugs to make her hormones go through the floor, which I'm sorry, estrogen is not all bad. It has some
Mhm.
benefits like bone health and mental health and such. And they're not looking at the toxins. Like we know all these different carcinogens. Like, why don't we look what's in her environment? Why don't
Mhm.
we look at what's going on with those hormones? I had a client, I'll just tell you a quick story. She is a new client for me. She started about 2 weeks ago and she had, hormone positive cancer. And she is telling me all these things. She had been on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for 6 years. No one was testing her. She felt like the progesterone wasn't doing great things. So she stopped that and was just taking the estrogen. Like, you don't do that. And you
Mhm.
need to be testing. Well, her oncologist, never asked the questions, was she taking any hormones? And never tested her. Like, it's insane. I don't even understand how
Yeah.
this is allowed. But to not even ask the questions and find out that she was doing that, and that obviously was a huge driver. And her tests are not back yet to see where her hormone levels are at, but I'll be very interested to see. So this is where we want to really dig into it. And I get it. Not everyone knows about this when they're doing standard of care, or maybe, they have too much outside influence. I am happy to work with oncologists if people want to, but a lot of times people wait till afterwards and they circle back around. So they really get to the why, because if you don't address those things, as soon as you're off the meds and everything, it's all coming right back. You know, it's like pulling weeds. You want to get it from the root. You don't want to just pull off the top.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, and that is, I know, such a fear if you've had it that it's going to come back. Yeah, so taking the steps to really address the root cause, yeah, feels
And that
important.
fear is there for a reason, because you know that they didn't get why it happened, because they dismiss
Mhm.
it. No, diet doesn't matter. No, it just happened. It's chance. You're unlucky. Like, I think somewhere inside us, we know that it doesn't, things like that don't just happen. It's not random. There's reasons. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or you did something purposely wrong. You know, like me, I had my mold was the big one. And like, I didn't know. And now I do.
Well, Katrina, this has been super interesting, fascinating for me personally, and I know it will be for listeners as well. I'm wondering, after everything that you've been through and now your years of, training and then working with clients, what advice would you give to others facing breast cancer or, other forms of cancer or just health struggles in general?
Yeah, that's the thing that's always on my heart is for people to get to the root cause and to really do the hard work, because that's going to be the prevention model. So, then you don't have to go through it again, kind of a thing where, if people have cancer, yes, like get the tumor under control, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're looking for the future so that it doesn't come back. And so making sure that you support your body so that, all these different things. So like for me, getting my hormones in balance and, getting my blood sugar in balance and addressing the emotional issues, like that allows my body to be freed up so that my body can heal the cancer and my body isn't overwhelmed to keep it in check ongoing. So I just encourage people to do that work, get the functional testing so they know they're not guessing like I was. And then they can have that peace of mind, because that's where the quality of life comes in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Katrina, tell us more about the work you're doing now and resources that you have.
Absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram. I've got, where I'm at, different information and resources there. It's just my name at Katrina Foe, Foe. And I'm going to drop a link with you, or give Casey a link to share with you all, to get my free roadmap to prevent cancer recurrence. So it goes into a little more depth about like what exactly you want to look for and all the different areas for those root cause drivers, and how to actually work on this for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Sounds like a really, really good resource.
And if anyone's interested in working with me, I work one-on-one with clients, and we have a new group program that should be starting in January. And that's at cancerfreedom.com.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Katrina, to share your personal story. It was really inspiring and really educational. And I know that others will find it so as well. So really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Casey.
Thanks.